Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to installment of Scott Selections here for Monday, January 9th. For again, today's play of the day, quick recap of what happened yesterday. We had a loss in the NFL with the Buccaneers first quarter plus 1.5 points at minus 145 on DraftKings. Really just a horrible beat. I thought the game read was spot on. Unfortunately, we got screwed over by a turnover late in the first quarter. Tampa used Brady and the starters for the first drive and change, and they scored a touchdown. We got exactly what we wanted. Atlanta had to go 90 yards or so with Ritter to tie the game, and they did. They scored a touchdown with about 3.5 minutes to go in the first quarter. Still fine, though. We are getting 1.5. There's only 3.5 minutes to go. All we have to do is avoid a turnover. And the second play of the drive, Godwin fumbled, Atlanta recovered, and Atlanta kicked a field goal with roughly 50 seconds to go in the quarter. So the Buccaneers blew a 7-point lead in the final 4 minutes of the first quarter, gave up 10 unanswered, and we picked up a loss. Really just a heartbreaker. I once again thought the read was perfect, and instead we were victimized by a bad beat, but it happens. Look for a bounce back winner here on Monday. And for today's play of the day, going to pivot to college football, looking at the final college football game of the season between TCU and Georgia in the national title game taking place at around 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And for this matchup, pretty big spread here. Georgia laying 12.5. And we're going to take it. We're going to take Georgia minus 12.5 at minus 110 on DraftKings. Time recording of 2:30 a.m. Eastern time. Couple reasons why I like Georgia in this spot. First reason, look at the actual line itself. Pretty generous. Shopping around, most books have 13 or 13.5, but DraftKings has 12.5 at minus 110. So no additional juice. You're saving roughly a point. I'll take that to the bank every time. But I do think this game is going to be a pretty intense, sharp square divide in my eyes. Of course, the public will be all over TCU. Double-digit underdog in a Cinderella role in a standalone football game. They're going to take a bunch of public money, but I do think there's a good reason why Georgia is an unprecedented favorite in the title game and why I do expect to see some sharp money coming in on Georgia right before game time. Big reason why Georgia is easily the best team in all college football, and TCU, of course, is still a very, very good team, but I think that they are still pretty far behind Georgia in my eyes. But to go through the actual numbers throughout the season, Georgia is averaging 39.8 points per game against FBS competition, which ranks 6th in the nation. TCU right behind them, but the main difference is defense. Georgia is allowing just 15.9 points per game, which ranks 5th in the nation. TCU, though, is allowing 27.2 points per game against FBS competition, which ranks 63rd. So both offenses elite. Georgia's defense, though, also elite. TCU's defense, pretty mediocre. And we saw that in the last game, giving up 45 points to J.J. McCarthy in Michigan. So I do think TCU's defense will really struggle against Georgia throughout this game. Plus, TCU, I will give them props for pulling off the upset against Michigan and nothing to really take away from that performance. However, I want to at least acknowledge how fortuitous TCU was at several portions of that game. TCU won the game 51-45. They had 2 defensive touchdowns, an overturned Michigan touchdown, which resulted in a fumble at the 1-yard line on the play after, and a 4th and goal trick play fail job by Michigan there at the goal line. So TCU got 2 defensive touchdowns, and 1 got taken off the board for Michigan's offense, and they also blew a 4th and goal play. Michigan left a lot of points off the board, and they also handed away 14 free points. I think TCU was a bit fortunate that they were able to score that many points against Michigan, and the defense giving up 45 against McCarthy could have been 52 or potentially even 59 if you assume everything goes well by the goal line. I'm not exactly impressed by TCU's defense. Let's put it that way. But you're looking at Georgia, and one thing they excel at defensively is stopping the run. Georgia's allowing just 84.7 rushing yards per game against FBS competition, which is the best in the nation, ranks number 1. TCU, very balanced offensively, but their star running back, Keandre Miller, did get injured in the Michigan game as he suffered a knee sprain. So far this season, 1,399 rushing yards and 17 rushing touchdowns. He might play in this game. We'll see. It might be a Blake Corum situation against Ohio State where he suits up, quote unquote, plays maybe 1 or 2 snaps, and then you see the backup play the entire game. But the point is, TCU, I think, will not be able to run the ball. They're going to have to air it out. And even though Stroud was able to do it against Georgia in the semifinals, I do think that Stroud and Ohio State's weapons are a lot better than TCU's. Stroud, whether you like him or not, is probably going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. Marvin Harrison Jr. will potentially be the number one pick in the draft when he's eligible to join the NFL. But you have a bunch of other weapons there. It's complementary pieces. TCU has Johnston, who's really, really good. Probably a top 10 pick. Not going to argue with that. The rest of the weapons, I think, could be better. And with Miller being injured, I think TCU might be pretty compromised. And not to mention the fact that Ohio State does have the much better offensive line compared to TCU. But you're also looking at the quarterback play for TCU, since I mentioned they probably won't be able to run the ball. Despite scoring 51 points against Michigan last week, their quarterback, Max Duggan, went 14 of 29 for 225 passing yards and 2 interceptions. Now, he did have 4 touchdowns, including 2 rushing, but the point is he really did not play well, completed less than 50% of his passes, and with that 225 in passing yards, a little bit misleading because he had the drag route to Johnston about 2 yards downfield, and then Johnston ran 76 yards for a touchdown. So if you take that play out, it means that he had about 150 passing yards, and Johnston did all the work for the other 76. So the point is, Duggan, in the actual pocket, I'm not overly impressed. I think that he's probably a day 2, day 3 prospect. He's very tough. He's mobile. But at the end of the day, I do think that he leaves a lot to be desired with his accuracy in the pocket. And Georgia's just too talented defensively. And I think that will be really the story of the game. Bennett, you can argue, is not the greatest quarterback either. However, people roasted him throughout the Ohio State game. And you look at his final stat line, he had roughly 400 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. So Bennett did a good job in the end against that defense. TCU got torched by J.J. McCarthy. I think that Bennett should be able to lead Georgia to probably north of 40. And I'm not sure TCU will be able to do enough to get to, let's say, 28 in this game. But with Georgia being so much deeper and more talented than TCU, there's a reason why it's really a case of David versus Goliath for this matchup. And I don't think TCU is talented enough. It's a great story, and I'm happy for him. But Georgia is really just cut from a different cloth, and I think they'll be able to show it in this game. To go through the actual recruiting numbers or the overall recruiting rankings of their players to show you how big the disparity is, TCU has 1 5-star player on the roster. Georgia, 15. Number of 4-star guys, TCU has 16. Georgia, 53. I just think the talent disparity is not even close. I think that Georgia is better in basically every single position group. You can argue quarterback if you want to make a Duggan case. I'm not going to fully argue with you. I think it's close, though. I'd probably lean Bennett, but I think it is close. The running back core, maybe you could argue TCU, but now Miller's injured, so I think Georgia has an edge there. And maybe secondary, you can argue TCU, but Georgia's better in every other category. They're better on the offensive line. They're better on the defensive line. I think they'll dominate in the trenches, and I think you'll see Georgia win this game comfortably. It might be a rout, it might not, but I do think Georgia will win this game eventually by at least 14 points. Play there once again here for Monday, January 9th is going to be on Georgia, minus 12.5 points at minus 110 on DraftKings. Bye, everyone.